Passion of our Lord according to Mark. Jesus and his disciples came to an olive grove called Gethsemane. Jesus said,
"Sit here while I go and pray."
He took Peter, James, and John with him, and he began to be filled with horror and deep distress. He told them,
"My soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and watch with me."
He went on a little further and fell face down on the ground. He prayed that if it would be possible, the awful hour awaiting him might pass him by.
"Abba, Father, everything is possible for you. Please take this cup of suffering away from me. Yet I want your will, not mine."
Then he returned and found the disciples sleeping. He said to Peter,
"Simon, are you asleep? Couldn't you stay awake and watch with me even 1 hour? Keep alert, pray. Otherwise, temptation will overpower you. For the spirit is willing enough, but the body is weak."
Then Jesus left again and prayed, repeating his pleadings. Again he returned to them and found them sleeping, for they just couldn't keep their eyes open, and they didn't know what to say. When he returned to them the third time, he said,
Still sleeping? Still resting? Enough. The time has come. I, the Son of Man, am betrayed into the hands of sinners. Up, let's be going. See, my betrayer is here.
And immediately as he said this, Judas, one of the 12 disciples, arrived with a mob that was armed with swords and clubs. They had been sent out by the leading priests, the teachers of religious law, and the other leaders. Judas had given them a prearranged signal. "You will know which one to arrest when I go and give him the kiss of greeting. Then you can take him away under guard." As soon as they arrived, Judas walked up to Jesus and exclaimed, "Teacher!" Then he gave him the kiss. The others grabbed Jesus and arrested him. But someone pulled out a sword and slashed off an ear of a high priest's servant. Jesus asked them,
Am I some dangerous criminal that you come armed with swords and clubs to arrest me? Why didn't you arrest me in the temple? I was there teaching every day. But these things are happening to fulfill what the scriptures say about me.
Meanwhile, all his disciples deserted him and ran away. There was a young man following along behind him, clothed only in a linen nightshirt. When the mob tried to grab him, they tore off his clothes, and he escaped and ran away naked. Jesus was led to the high priest's home, where the leading priests, other leaders, and teachers of religious law had gathered. Meanwhile, Peter followed far behind and then slipped inside the gates of the high priest's courtyard. For a while he sat with the guards, warming himself by the fire. Inside, the leading priests and the entire high council were trying to find witnesses who would testify against Jesus so they could put him to death. But their efforts were in vain. Many false witnesses spoke against him, but they contradicted each other. Finally, some men stood up to testify against him with this lie.
"We heard him say, 'I will destroy this temple made with human hands, and in 3 days I will build another one made without human hands.'"
But even then, they didn't get their story straight. Then the high priest stood up before the others and asked Jesus,
"Well, aren't you going to answer these charges? What do you have to say for yourself?"
Jesus made no reply. Then the high priest asked him,
"Are you the Messiah, the Son of the blessed God?"
I am. And you will see me, the Son of Man, sitting at God's right hand in the place of power and coming back on the clouds of heaven.
Then the high priest tore his clothing to show his heart and said,
"Why do you need other witnesses? You have all heard his blasphemy. What is your verdict?"
and they all condemned him to death. Then some of them began to spit at him, and they blindfolded him and hit his face with their fists.
Who hit you that time, you prophet?
They jeered at him, and even the guards were hitting him as they led him away. Meanwhile, Peter was below in the courtyard. One of the servant girls who worked for the high priest noticed Peter Peter warming himself at the fire. She looked at him closely and then said,
You were one of those with Jesus the Nazarene.
I don't know what you're talking about.
He went out into the entranceway. Just then, a rooster crowed. The servant girl saw him standing there and began telling the others.
That man is definitely one of them.
Peter denied it again. A little later, some of the other bystanders began saying to Peter,
You must be one of them because you are from Galilee.
I swear by God, I don't know this man you're talking about.
Immediately, the rooster crowed the second time. Suddenly, Jesus' words flashed through Peter's mind. Before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. And he broke down and cried. Very early in the morning, the leading priests, other leaders, and teachers of the religious law, the entire high council, met to discuss their next step. They bound Jesus and took him to Pilate, the Roman governor.
Are you the king of the Jews?
Yes, it is as you say.
Then the leading priest accused him of many crimes, and Pilate asked him,
Aren't you going to say something? What about all these charges against you?
but Jesus said nothing, much to Pilate's surprise. Now it was the governor's custom to release 1 prisoner each year at Passover time. Anyone that people requested. One of the prisoners at that time was Barabbas, convicted along with others for murder during the insurrection. The mob began to crowd in towards Pilate, asking him to release a prisoner as usual.
Should I give you the king of the Jews?
He realized by now that the leading priest had arrested Jesus out of envy. But at this point, the leading priest stirred up the mob to demand the release of Barabbas instead of Jesus.
But if I release Barabbas, what shall I do with this man you call the king of the Jews?
Crucify him.
Why? What crime has he committed?
But the crowd only roared the louder.
Crucify him.
So Pilate, anxious to please the crowd, released Barabbas to them. He ordered Jesus flogged with a lead-tipped whip, then turned him over to the Roman soldiers to crucify him. The soldiers took him into their headquarters and called out the entire battalion. They dressed him in a purple robe and made a crown of long, sharp thorns and put it on his head. Then they saluted, yelling,
Hail, King of the Jews!
and they beat him on the head with a stick, spit on him, and dropped to their knees in mock worship. When they were finally tired of mocking him, they took off the purple robe and put his clothes on him again. Then they led him away to be crucified. A man named Simon, who was from Cyrene, was coming in from the country just then, and they forced him to carry Jesus' cross. And they brought Jesus to a place called Golgotha. They offered him wine, drugged with myrrh, but he refused it. Then they nailed him to the cross. They gambled for his clothes, throwing dice to decide who would get them. It was 9 o'clock in the morning when the crucifixion took place. A signboard was fastened to the cross above Jesus' head, announcing the charge against him. It read, "The King of the Jews." 2 criminals were crucified with him, their crosses on either side of his. And the people passing by shouted abuse, shaking their heads in mockery.
Look at you now. You can destroy the temple, rebuild the building in 3 days. Well then, save yourself and come down from the cross.
The leading priests and teachers of religious law also mocked Jesus.
He saved others, but he can't save himself. Let this Messiah, this King of Israel, come down from the cross so we can see it and believe him.
Even the 2 criminals who were being crucified with Jesus ridiculed him. At noon, darkness fell across the whole land until 3 o'clock. Then at that time, Jesus called out with a loud voice,
Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani. My God, why have you forsaken me?
Some of the bystanders misunderstood and thought he was calling for the prophet Elijah. One of them ran and filled a sponge with sour wine, holding it up to him on a stick so he could drink.
Leave him alone. Let us see whether Elijah will come and take him down.
Then Jesus uttered another loud cry and breathed his last. And the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. When the Roman officer who stood facing him saw how he had died, he exclaimed,
Truly, this was the Son of God.
"Here endeth the Passion of Christ."